Hey guys, Colleen Wolfe from NFL Network. And look, you may or may not know, I'm from Philly. I'm ride or die Philadelphia, but especially when it comes to sports. So you guys need to check out Mike Small on the Killing Me Smalls podcast. This guy crushes it, and I can't wait to hear what he has to say next.
You're killing me, Smalls!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Killing Me Smalls podcast. I am your host, Mike Small. On the pod today, my buddy, the great Keith Pompey, the Sixers beat reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer, will be joining us. I've been dying to talk to Keith since Jimmy Butler went on the JJ Redick podcast and had some things to say about why he may have left. We will also talk about Keith's impressions of the Yaron Weitzman book, Tanking to the Top, as well as what I would expect us to talk about would be what in God's name could we expect of the Sixers if they come back and play this year. But first, I welcome you to subscribe to this podcast. Please give it a rating and a review. And also, please give me a follow on Twitter at RealMikeSmall. Follow me, and I'll follow you right back. The Killing Me Smalls podcast is a proud part of the Painted Lines Podcast Network. Check out the site at paintedlines.com or on YouTube. Let's bring Keith onto the podcast. All right, let's bring my guy Keith onto the pod. Keith, always a pleasure, my friend.
What's up, man? Long time no speak.
Absolutely. So you've been hiding on me, huh?
I wish.
That's the line you always give me. So I gotta give you credit, man. Every day I read an article in the Philadelphia Inquirer with another twist of what you can do with the Sixers, with the NBA season. It's got to be tough coming up with topics, huh?
Yeah, it kind of sort of is. But, you know, it's one of those things where, luckily, fortunately, there's a lot of different storylines and there's a lot of different options. But you're right. I mean, it would be great if we were playing basketball, but at the same time, basketball isn't important right now. We just have to try to get, healthy and get people healthy, rather.
So for me, I'm thinking in hypotheticals, and, I'm thinking about if the Sixers don't finish the season, or if they do finish the season, what does that mean? And I've been dying to talk to you since the JJ Redick podcast where you had Jimmy Butler on there. There was a lot to unpack from that. I mean, for me, I think there have been a lot of rumors about Jimmy Butler and Ben Simmons not getting along, but it sounded like, to me, he put everything square in the lap of Brett Brown.
Yeah, I mean, it was no secret that he and Brett Brown didn't really get along, it was one of those things. I think that, there's the rumors that, Jimmy and Ben didn't get along. Jimmy and other people. I think that it was just one of those things where I think when they got into that argument, or when everyone said that, Jimmy blew up at practice, and then a lot of people, and they even came on the podcast, that Jimmy was actually speaking up for teammates. I think that it kind of got blown out of proportion a little bit. I also think that Jimmy is a guy who, he's one of these guys, he means well. I mean, we all grew up with people like that. He's not the guy that when he comes to the group, he's going to say, "Hey, how you doing?" He's going to be like, "Hey, bleep, 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 bleep." But that's just who he is. We all have friends like that. And I think that, it kind of sort of rubbed Brett Brown the wrong way. But again, Jimmy is just a personality. He's the type of guy who he doesn't like to be told what to do. He's the type of guy with an extremely high basketball IQ, and he's a veteran, and he's used to things being done a certain way. And if they're not, he's going to speak up, and he's going to say what he means, and he's just going to, be vocal about it. And I think all that kind of like rubbed Brett Brown the wrong way. But if you look at it, you can say, well, maybe they would have been a little bit better if they would have had Jimmy and JJ back this year.
Well,
but
I think you can make
personality.
Yeah, I think you can make that argument. I being that we have time on our hands, I thought it would be fun to go back and look at the press conference when Elton Brand and Josh Harris introduced Al Horford, Tobias Harris, and Josh Richardson and Kyle O'Quinn and everybody else to the new team. And you really did have that energy and feeling like this was going to be a better situation and a better team. It hasn't. And I want to talk about that. But before that, I'm still stuck on this Jimmy Butler thing. Not as much about him coming back to the Sixers. Okay, you know what? It was going to be a 5-year deal for a guy, who's got some wear and tear on his tires and can be a pain in the neck sometimes. I get that. The issue to me is a bigger one, and that's the exposure of Brett Brown. And that's something I've been thinking about a lot during this break as I go back and try to kill some time and fill my basketball needs mentally. I mean, I thought that was the nail in the coffin for me. The way, and JJ talked about liking Brett on the podcast, but didn't defend him as a coach. I thought that was interesting as well. And I also thought a lot of the indictments in the Yaron Weitzman book, Tanking to the Top, really point the finger squarely at Brett Brown as somebody who's not able to galvanize his team as a leader. Am I overreading this?
No, I don't think so. I mean, well, here's the thing. I think it was part of the problem in the beginning from day one. It was a culture that was basically established. I mean, you have Brett, he wants to coach the team. You had Sam Hinkie, who wanted to be the GM. And I think the culture was established early on to whereas we got these young guys, we're going to tank. We don't have any veteran leaders. And there wasn't anybody who basically said that, this is what you do. This is what you do. And I think that stuff like that gets, out of hand. I mean, everyone's not like a Greg Popovich, but then you also got to understand that in Greg Popovich, he had a couple guys who, and David Robinson, who was in the Naval Academy, who, took the discipline, to Tim Duncan, who was a soft-spoken guy, to the couple of these other guys who came from overseas. So it was a matter of, you're dealing with different types of animals and you can get away with different type of things with them. And I just think that, the culture just was established during the process early on that led to guys getting away with things. And when you continue to do that, it tends to get out of hand.
It's interesting if you break it down as to where they got to a point. And what I mean by that is, you really thought that the team was on the rise 2 years ago, when they lost that series to the Celtics. And it was probably, hard to fire Brett Brown at that point because they had just won 52 games. They come back, they do the star hunting thing. They bring in Butler, they bring in Tobias Harris, take Toronto to Game 7. So it's almost hard to fire Brett. But when you put all the pieces together, to your point, back in the process with what we learned about Nerlens Noel not being disciplined at all, Jahlil Okafor not being disciplined or managed at all, Joel Embiid constantly having to get in shape, Ben Simmons, ever since the day Brett said he wanted Ben Simmons to shoot once a game, he hasn't taken one 3-pointer since then. I think they might need an alpha dog as a coach, and I just don't know if they'll be able to get one. But right now, it seems to me there's a strong discipline problem on this team.
True, but it's also not just the coach. I mean, it's the culture. It's the culture.
But isn't the coach the culture, though? I mean, I see what you're saying about Elton Brand and the ownership, but the coach,
about Elton. But what I'm saying is, this is what I'm saying. I mean, we can go on and you can talk about, does Brett Brown, do they need to go give it a new coach? Of course. But you got to realize something. I think that the thing that happens is it gets to a point where, how much power does a coach have when players hang out with owners? You know what I mean? How much power does the coach have? And yes, it would be great if he was that type of guy. But I also think that, every year that someone became the scapegoat. Like when stuff goes wrong, it becomes the scapegoat. Like, for instance, you can go all the way back to Andrew Bynum. When Andrew Bynum was here, they had problems, but it was always someone else. Now, again, Brett Brown might have been better off saying, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And maybe if he was stricter and this and that. But no one told them to give him a 3-year, $15 million contract. No one told them to extend his contract after he won 10 games one year. You understand what I'm saying? And no one told him last year after everyone said that if he didn't make it to the conference finals, he was going to be fired. And then they have a meeting at the 11th hour and decide that he's not going to be fired. Then they come back and say, hey, we never said that. So in other words, is Brett Brown of some people can consider him the problem right now. Some people could say that, but they've been saying that for a couple of years now, but they kept extending them. So whose fault is it? Is it his fault or is it their fault because they kept extending them? Is it his fault that, the players got empowered to where they don't listen to the coach? You know what I mean? So, I mean, again, I'm not taking up for Brett, and I think that Brett probably will lose his job if they come back. I mean, depending on how much money they lose, and I think that if the season would have went all the way through and they would have, failed to reach it to the conference finals, which would have been a huge possibility, I think Brett Brown would have been fired. But at the same time, I do believe that Brett Brown isn't the only problem here. Right now, yes, you can go in there and you can get a disciplinarian coach, and he can do certain things, but it's also a players' league. And I think that once you start giving people enough power and you start doing things, and then all of a sudden they run what's going on, it's bigger than just the coach at that particular time. But again, I get you early on, but there were some problems, and last year there were some problems. A lot of the fans felt like Brett Brown should have been fired. They brought him back, and now the same fans are saying, "Hey, he has to go. He has to go." Well, they brought him back. They kept it when they were tanking. A lot of the fans were saying, I know they're struggling, but I don't know if Brett's the right coach. Well, they gave him an extension. You understand what I'm saying?
Oh, I understand completely. The question that I have back at you is, you had said, the opposite of Brett would be a disciplinarian coach, like a Tom Thibodeau or something like that. I think there's a difference between a disciplinarian and a coach that has cachet, somebody that the players respect based on accomplishment. Pat Riley had that, obviously, when he went from New York to Miami. I don't know who would be out there, but somebody like that, I think, would be it. I'm not saying Pat Riley. That's once in a generation, but somebody like that has credibility, that walks in a locker room and the players go, oh, man, we got to listen to this guy. Do you think there's somebody like that could be available?
Yeah, but I'm not going to name names right now, too. I mean, like, soon when if something happens, I mean, there are several guys on the tip of my tongue, but I don't think it's kind of respectful, like, once a guy, like, dead man walking. That's like saying, hey, Mike, I got somebody that's going to replace you. And believe me, I have the utmost respect for you, but, I've been asked that on several radio stations to come up with certain coaches, and I just won't do it. I mean, I think, like, the ideal coach, though, without naming names, like, for what you're saying, is going to have to be someone who was a player and someone who won a championship and someone who basically a younger guy who some of these guys can relate to. You know what I mean? That's what I think. There are certain guys out there, I think, on a short list that people can basically, if they know what I'm talking about, they follow those things. There are a couple guys out there right now, but I just would hate to, do the dead man walking thing on Brett Brown just for respect of him. You know what I mean?
I respect you for that, and I will come back to you, and we will talk about Tim Duncan and some of the other people that could be out there. You see what I did there?
I don't think Tim Duncan would be a good coach, though. I don't think he would be.
No, I don't either, actually. But that that fits exactly what you were saying. Guy who's younger, won a championship, multiple championships. But yeah, I agree with you.
But there's certain people out there that's younger who won championships as coaches.
Oh, right. Yeah, there are.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll save that for another. We'll save that for another day. Let's take a quick break. Normally, we would bring a commercial to you talking about getting fryered up with my guy Kobe Fryer. But with COVID-19, I thought I'd bring Kobe onto the podcast to talk a little bit about how he can help people that might be struggling in a car situation or having a financial situation around a car. I wanted to just ask you a couple of questions about how you can help some of our listeners with some of their car needs. A couple of the questions that I thought about were, what if your lease is up this month and you have to trade it in? Or what if you can't make your payment? Or if you have a lease situation? What are some things that they can do? And thank you for volunteering to help our listeners.
Well, thanks for having me on, Mike. A longtime listener. Like I said, I've been here since the beginning. It is crazy times. And the most important thing is keep our staff safe and keep our customers safe and keep everybody safe. Like, this isn't a time where we're really thinking about pushing out cars, but there are circumstances, there are necessities. People are in panic mode, and if you follow me on Facebook, you follow me on LinkedIn or Instagram, any of that stuff, Get Fired Up, or just me, Kobe Fryer, on Facebook, you'll see I talk about it a lot. And, whether you're my customer, whether you're not my customer, I really don't care. If people are struggling, now's the time where I have 30 years of experience and I can help them. If it's as simple as negotiating a deferment for them on their payments to our banks or their bank that they're financed with, I can help them out with that. I can, script it for them, or I can even make the call for them. I've got no problem. If somebody's lease is up, we are, Governor Murphy in New Jersey, as of Monday, said that we could sell cars by appointment, curbside, if we took every precaution. So we do have the ability to help people out that their leases are up, or God forbid they were in an accident, they're totaled, or they need a car, and they can just contact me, and we'll do most of the negotiations will be done by Zoom. All the paperwork will be done back and forth through email, and we'll deliver them the car. No test driving, anything like that. We just don't want contact with them or with us. If they don't like the car, something happens, I'll give them 4 days to change their mind. No questions asked.
That's great. Kobe, how can people get in touch with you?
Easiest way is my cell phone number. It's not like I'm going anywhere, and I'd love some human contact. So 609-706-2101, or Facebook, Instagram, Get Fired Up, Facebook, Kobe Fryer, or that's COBYFRIER, or LinkedIn, Kobe Fryer. Like I said, reach out to me with any questions. I have a lot of solutions for your car needs. I have a lot of solutions for your insurance needs. If I don't know the answer, I can find out for you. It's pretty simple.
Or you can get in touch with me, and I will put you in touch with Kobe through the podcast. Thanks, Kobe.
This is Ian Rappaport from NFL Network. You're killing me, Smalls. Stay tuned for more from Mike Small.
So let's say the Sixers come back. Let's say one of these 500 plans comes to fruition where the NBA comes back, plays a short season, and goes into the playoffs. Is there a part of you that thinks they'll be better because they're rested? Hopefully Ben Simmons is healthy. We haven't heard a word about Ben Simmons' health, which I think is kind of weird. But I think that, some of the nagging injuries, I don't think Al Horford's been healthy since December. They could be better.
They could be. I think it all depends on Embiid, all of it. If Embiid comes in and he's motivated, if he comes in shape, and like you said, Al Horford gets a little, because you're right, he has been playing with nagging injuries. You have to give him power. But also, if the coaching staff can, get him more involved in the game plan, with Embiid playing, if Simmons does come back, I think, it's all, that's great, but it's all about Joel Embiid. If Joel Embiid comes to play, and if he's in shape, Joel Embiid is the most dominant player in the NBA if he wants to be. And I think the fact that them getting a break and coming back and getting their head together, they should say, hey, you know what? Before we were drinking the Kool-Aid, like you said in that press conference and doing all this stuff. Now we really know what it's like to get smacked in the mouth. Let's come out. Let's all be accountable and let's play. But they need Joel Embiid to be the beast that they thought he was going to be, or the beast that they think he can be. And if he can do that, I think the 76ers could surprise a couple people, or not surprise people, but they can live up to the expectations that we had for him. You know, because let's face it. I mean, we were talking about Brett Brown. You know, everyone's saying like, "Oh, he has to go. He has to do this." You know, if I'm Brett Brown, what I want to do is the first thing is I want to make sure that my family is safe, including his parents, everyone, his sister, all of them. I want to make sure that everybody in my family is safe. And then after that, I'm hunkering down and I'm going through just about all the game film I can go through. Stuff with Al Horford when he was in Atlanta, Boston, go through all the game film this year. And I'm trying to devise a plan to make this team better. But again, it also all depends on Joel Embiid. If he comes back in shape and if he comes back motivated, I think the Sixers can live up to the expectations.
So not to get back to what we talked about in the first segment, but isn't that the complete reason why you need a new coach? Don't you need somebody? I don't think I get the feeling that Simmons and Embiid are done with Brett. I mean, I'm sure they like him. They say nice things about him. He's a good guy. They don't respect him because if you respect him, you're going to come back in shape if you're Embiid, and you're going to shoot 3-pointers if you're Simmons, and because that's what he wants you to do.
I guess, but dude, the coach didn't put this roster together. Like, here's the thing about the NBA nowadays. So, you know, here's the thing about then you look at the Sixers, right? You have Al Horford, who is the backup center, making $28 million this year. But to justify that, you got to say he's the starting power forward too. And then you have Joel Embiid, the starting center, making $27.5. There is no other team in the NBA that allocated that much money for that position. So when you factor it in, you look at the bench, you look at the Clippers, you look at other teams, you've got guys like Lou Williams making starters money. They're not making the max, but they're making starters money to come off the bench. The way this roster was constructed, it's hard for them to win. Now, again, they're saying this team is built for the playoffs. Yeah, because in the playoffs, you shrink the roster. So I think that there's two things. Yeah, you can say what what people say about, players playing and going hard for the coach. But at the same time, the roster is flawed. Last year, in order for you so you have to decide. See, here's the thing. In order for Ben Simmons to be successful, Al Horford works with him as a center because he gets out and go and stuff like that. But you also need another ball handler with Ben because there's going to come points in time when you want Ben to play the point forward. So you need another ball handler out there with him. They don't have that in the starting lineup they had. And then when you're with Embiid in a half-court setting, you need a guy who, first of all, you need another closer because you know that Embiid is one of those things where guys always double and triple team him in the end and he turns the ball over. So if you have another closer, that might help out a little bit, right? They don't have that. And you also need a space setter. They don't have that. So we can talk about Brett and you can say that they need to upgrade it. But when you look at this roster, it's great for fantasy basketball, or it was. It just didn't work out. The pieces didn't fit. And they came to that realization when they decided to bench Al Horford or bring him off the bench, make him come off the bench. So again, I get what you're saying, and I get it, but it's deeper than the coach to me because the pieces just don't fit.
Well, the only thing I'd push back on you on that is they call it the collaborative, right? And Brett Brown helped put Elton Brand in his place. And I can't see them signing Al Horford or any of these other guys without Brett blessing it.
Right? Yeah, but do you really think? I don't know. I think that.
I mean, just picture this: that it's that day in June, and they say, "Look, you want Jimmy Butler back, or we can get Josh Richardson and bring in Al Horford, get some leadership, veteran presence, back up Joel, and he can play some four." He's probably like, "Hell yeah!" Right?
I guess I wasn't in that. I mean, I guess, but my thing is, he's a coach, and when they say collaborative, we're talking about a coach. I mean, and I get it, but I think that when you look at Embiid, you can, and for your argument, you can say you look at Embiid. Embiid's going to get hurt. We're gonna try to get somebody who can come in and play games. Yeah, let's work it out. But if you got to depend on your coach, who, we're talking about collaborative, and he gives the blessing. To me, that's a whole lot different than the people in the front office making the decision. The coach is looking like, okay, if you're going to help us win. But it just seems like the pieces didn't fit. Now, maybe you can make an argument and say it's up to him to devise a plan to make it fit. But the problem is, bigger than that, is if you don't have a guy who's going to shoot from the perimeter or a point guard, and then his best spot is to get on the block, then you got 3 guys on the block. You know what I mean? That's part of the problem. Now, my thing is, are you going to bench the all-star point guard? Hey, but now I think that the Sixers, they would have been, hindsight is always better, in 2020,
Sure.
But I think that, and for the Sixers, they would have been better off bringing in another like point guard, a combo guard, so to speak. That's someone who can take some of those duties away from Ben. You know what I mean? And who can create some space at times.
Shake
but
Milton.
It just seems like,
Maybe that's Shake Milton.
Yeah, it's Shake Milton, but they never knew who Shake Milton was until the end of the season. They didn't know who Shake Milton was until Josh Richardson and Ben Simmons got hurt.
No, you're right about that. But going forward, he can solve a lot of the issues. So I guess I'll just wrap it up with this, because we can go hindsight all day, and that's why I thought that press conference was fun to go watch. I'd recommend you doing it, because I think it was you or somebody else asked, aren't you concerned about getting offense? And Brett was like, it's going to come together. Although he said, the offense would be together by Christmas, but that's another discussion. I guess what I'm asking you is, going forward, assuming the Sixers don't get to the finals, we talked about Brett. Would you give this roster another shot, or would you do all you could to get Horford off the team and try to get a little bit smaller?
I think they're going to try to, but I don't know if there's a lot of teams that are going to take that contract off their hands. I'm sorry. They may look up and get one, but that's a lot of money for a guy who's about to turn 34. And a guy who didn't exactly have one of his better seasons. I think that, and if you get rid of him, what are you going to get back in return? I just think that, unfortunately, and then you look at Tobias Harris's contract, that's a lot of money as well.
Yeah.
Josh Richardson, but, that's $11 million comparable to, the 28 and the 32. So I don't know. Again, like you said, you may have to, most likely they'll probably get a new coach. But I think they just have to try to figure out and work it out. I think that some of these moves they made might have hurt them in regards to trading.
Well, if they had to get rid of somebody, Tobias or Horford, figuring maybe you'd have to stick Richardson in there to get him to take a contract, or the Oklahoma City draft pick, or whatever it is, because Richardson's only got a year left on his deal. Who do you think's more tradable? Which contract do you think is more movable?
Wow. That's a tough
I don't
one,
bring you on for
because
easy questions, Keith. I'm putting you to work today.
No, it's a tough one, just because, Tobias, that's 180. Tobias is younger. Tobias may be able, in the right situation, he can do some things. The only thing about Al is, Al has been playing, he's been playing through the pain. Al Horford, when he's the backup center, he looks well. He plays well. But the only thing is like you're a little fearful of what's going to happen at 34 and 35, and you still have that on the books. Now, maybe if you lump him in with Josh Richardson, but the problem with that is, Josh Richardson, he's going to be up for a new contract in a couple of years.
Yeah.
So you may trade for Josh, and then Josh might be saying, hey, man, it was nice knowing y'all, but I'm about to test free agency. I'm trying to get paid. So, that's a tough one. But maybe Tobias, but again, you have to know that that's 180 million. That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
That's a lot. But maybe Tobias, because I don't like if the situation is wrong, Josh may not want to stay. If you go to Sacramento or somewhere, you know what I mean? He may want to come back home. He may want to go back to Miami.
I mean, I've had a theory on Horford all year. I went to the first game that he returned to Boston. He did not play. The Sixers won the game on the road, which you probably remember because they didn't win too many of them on the road. And Horford couldn't play because I forgot what the actual injury was. But I think he came back too soon and was not good when he came back. And I don't think he's ever been healthy since that time. I feel like giving him another shot, to be honest with you.
Yeah, probably. And here's the thing, like, just to go ahead with the whole Brett Brown thing, I understand that what people say about Brett Brown, but I also think that is also like low-hanging fruit. Like, it's easy to say right now, you got to get rid of him. You have to get rid of him. But you never talk about that. I think the problems, yes, the coach, he could have made some better decisions. Yes, when you have so many high-powered or high-priced players, the coach is the guy to go. But to me, it's just one of those things where, there is a lot of things that went wrong with this team, a lot. And it's just easy to pinpoint him, but there's some other bigger issues, and to me, I do think that, put it like this, if the season would have continued all the way through, right, and they would have struggled, I do believe that he would be gone. The only thing that I still think that he's going to go, but I feel like if the owners, if the season doesn't resume and the owners will say, well, you know what, we don't want to go out there and hire a high-priced guy right now. Maybe we may give Brett another chance. And if he struggles early on, then we'll fire him and we'll have an interim coach, so to speak, for the rest of the season, talking about next year. But to me, it just seems like, it's easy to kill him right now. It just really is, and it just seems like everyone keeps doing it. I understand why, but I don't think he was the only problem.
No, I agree with you. And I'll wrap it up with this opinion. I mean, I look at the coach as the person that needs to be in charge of all things having to do with the team. And if you look at college, nobody's looking at the athletic director if Duke doesn't do well. They're looking at Mike Krzyzewski. No one's looking at the athletic director if Alabama doesn't do well. They're looking at Nick Saban. And nobody's looking at R.C. Buford if San Antonio doesn't do well. They're looking at Greg Popovich. They need an alpha dog. They need somebody that is going to lead and have the respect of the players, take accountability, and set up a culture of accountability. And I think all the problems with ownership, all the problems, whatever you think about Elton Brand, whatever you think about any of it, goes away with an alpha dog as a coach, somebody who's credible. That's Mike Small theory.
I agree.
Keith, man,
I'm with you.
I love you as a guy, and I love having you as a guest on the podcast. And I hope you and your family stay safe. I want to thank everybody for listening to the podcast. It's always a lot of fun to talk basketball, and I always learn something when I talk to Keith Pompey. Keith, tell everybody how they can find you.
You can follow me on Twitter on Pompey on Sixers, and you can read my stuff in Enquirer.com.
And you got a podcast.
Oh, yeah, Locked On Sixers. I didn't know you wanted to plug that.
Hey, man.
Locked On Sixers, yeah.
You gave me my podcasting start, so I always plug you. Keith, thanks a lot for joining today.
All right, thank you.